Aloha, amigos, and welcome back for yet another episode of the Off Grid podcast. This week's guest is with Emily Scott. Emily is an international mountain leader, 7 times Ironman finisher, and a ski instructor in the Swiss Alps. In this conversation, we talk about leaving Emily's previous job as a chartered accountant in London, how fitness may be a form of escapism in our lives, summiting all 282 Munros in Scotland in 120 consecutive days, advice for solo female adventurers, and Emily's philosophy on money and taking the leap to follow your dream. We really get into it in this one, in the practical steps to pursue adventure as a lifestyle and the perspective required to make it happen. So I hope you love it, and on with the podcast. Wait. Just before you listen to this next episode, can I ask just one thing? If you are enjoying this podcast, please just click follow or subscribe on whatever you're listening to. It really helps me grow this podcast, helps me get better guests on, helps have better conversations that you guys are loving, and it keeps the party rocking. Thanks a lot, guys. All right, on with the podcast. Emily, welcome to the Off Grid podcast.
Thank you very much for having me.
Great to have you on. I'm very excited to get into all of your adventures and what you've been up to in your life. But for those who don't know your world, how would you describe the life that you live?
I basically base myself in the mountains, and if I'm outdoors and moving in some way, I'm probably pretty happy. So in the winter, I work as a ski instructor. I think that's fairly self-explanatory what I do. Go skiing every day. Hopefully try and make people better at skiing and have a good time on their holidays. And then in the summer, I work as a hiking and trail running guide. So I'm a qualified international mountain leader. So that's kind of, how I went for the double-pronged approach to staying in the mountains year round.
That's a lovely way to make it work year round. And after hearing that, I was actually wonderfully surprised to hear that you actually trained as an accountant earlier on in your life. What was the context of your life at that time?
It's funny. I think now people sometimes are quite shocked whenever I say that I used to be a chartered accountant, and they're like, "You what?" But I mean, I was always quite a good student at school. I worked pretty hard. I got all right grades. Maths was probably one of my strongest subjects. And then I went to university. I got really involved in university sport and maybe didn't quite get as involved in as much in my degree as I maybe should have. But after uni, I wasn't really sure what to do or where to go. And I basically ended up having an interview with an accountancy firm, and actually got offered a job, but on a basis of not really sure that your CV lines you up for accountancy. Why do you want to do this? And I was a bit like, I'm not really sure, but I don't hate maths. I basically started off on, I think it was a 4-month trial period that was like a 2-way trial, and they kind of said that if I got on okay, then they'd offer me a training contract so I could do my qualifications to become a chartered accountant. So I did that, and but then whenever I qualified, I went and started training to be a ski instructor.
Wow. Okay. And obviously a lot going on in your life at that time, making life decisions and which way you wanted to take it. How old were you at that time, and what was it like as well for you living in London and going through that kind of, I guess, graduate ladder?
I don't know. I mean, I feel like after I left uni, like a lot of my friends seemed to kind of gravitate towards London. It seemed to be the thing to do, like in your kind of early mid-20s. And then it's funny because actually I do, whenever I think back to that time, whenever I was deciding about what to do kind of post-qualification, it was like big life decisions, and kind of felt like, like being on a bit of a precipice, or, like a big old junction in the road, as to, because I could have had like quite a good career in accountancy. Like it was, yeah, I mean, and certainly it's, offers good career prospects, financial stability, all these kind of things. Decent salary, especially as you kind of progress. Um, but fundamentally, I think I just kind of found that I wasn't particularly happy. And I kind of went through quite a lot of kind of agonizing about what makes me happy. And yeah, I think that's kind of where I kept coming back to those, the like, yeah, being outside and having movement. And I mean, when I was working in accountancy and in finance, like, I'd be two computer screens all day, tapping away, living for the weekend. And I definitely found like probably the last six months to a year that I was in London, I was, you know, every weekend going off somewhere, like going to Snowdonia, going to the Lake District, sometimes going to Scotland in a weekend, driving back in on the M4 and like feeling myself falling asleep at the wheel and just being like, this is not a good way to be, kind of passing the time. Yeah. And then my firm had a few overseas offices, and I was in discussions about maybe moving to an overseas office and seeing if that would be a better fit. And then it just kind of didn't quite work out. Like, I really considered there was an option to go to New Zealand, which I think would have been amazing, but it was like in quite a rural area, like, and it would still be doing finance and still sitting at a computer. And then eventually I just actually asked to take a sabbatical from work once I qualified. And then, yeah, I started on my ski instructor exam, started on that pathway, which was more just to kind of have something to show for 3 months of unpaid leave. But then I did 2 weeks of teaching at the end of that season and really enjoyed it, and went back to work in May. And I think by the August, I knocked on my boss's door and just kind of asked for a word. And he's like, it's never a good sign when someone closes the door. And so I was kind of like, yeah, I'm going to hand in my notice. And he was like, another ski season. And yeah, and that's kind of, yeah, what is it now? 12 years ago or something like that.
How old were you at that time?
Now you're going to make me show how old I am now.
Just a roundabout ballpark figure.
I must have been, I don't know, 27, something like that. Is that right? 26.
How did you know within yourself that change was needed?
Do I know? Have I decided it yet? I don't know. I think it's so true. I think, you're on this like almost like a hamster wheel, aren't you? That, you do GCSEs, you do your A levels, you go get a degree, then you go get a professional qualification. Like, that's kind of what it felt like. I was always striving towards something else. And to be honest, like, since I've come down the skiing route and like the international mountain leader route and stuff, like, I'm still chasing qualifications. Like, I feel like I'm always still striving for the next thing, but it's just slightly different tickets that I'm picking up now. But yeah, I mean, I don't know, but then maybe sometimes that helps to kind of give a sense of direction that, you've got something that you're working towards or whatever. But I do find it funny that, in the UK anyway, like whenever we're 13 and picking our GCSEs, that can dictate the whole course of the rest of your life. Like, that the subjects that you pick or don't pick at that age can limit what you can do as a degree level or as a career, etc., etc. And like, I mean, I look back now and I didn't even do geography at GCSE, and geography now would be, for where I find myself now, like, geography would have been one of the most useful things I could have done. But we are where we are. And I think it's always funny because whenever you look back, I think one of the things that I find, like, another place that I had like a very near junction was that I was like, I nearly went into the army. And I think that's like one of those ones that whenever I look back on, I'm like, that would have been quite a different pivot point in my life. Like, but I think it's kind of, sometimes I look back and I'm like, oh, why didn't I just go join the army? I think I would have loved it. But then it's actually like just kind of trying to remember that all the decisions that you make at the time you made them based on the information you held at that time, and you tried to make the best decision at that moment in time based on the information you had available. So to try not to get too caught up on decisions that were made and times that have passed, because the time's passed anyway. But also to not feel too stuck in a route because of all that time that you've spent doing that qualification or whatever, when actually you've got the whole rest of your life ahead of you, even though obviously you don't know how long that's going to be, but it's never too late to kind of make a bit of a shift, I think. And that's something I try and remind myself sometimes. Like I only recently stopped paying my like my subscriptions and like gave up my like ability to call myself a chartered accountant. Like, and that was, even though I'd stepped away from the career quite a long time before, it still felt like, whew, I'm actually drawing a line underneath this now. It kind of felt a bit like I maybe like burnt a bridge, but equally, if I broke my legs really badly and needed to earn some money, I could still probably revisit that route if I needed to, you know.
And you said that you were going to set out to do an Ironman every year until you were 30 years old. And I was wondering if that commitment and maybe obsession with fitness was a kind of escapism for you.
Yeah, I think definitely. Like, it's quite funny because I now haven't done a triathlon since COVID. And the last couple of years, I've been starting to kind of feel that little itch and being like, oh, maybe this year's my return to triathlon. But then it's just like, actually, I don't know, I find myself on like the Ironman website and then I'm like, entry fees are so high before you even get there. And actually, like, you know, like where I live, like there's so much cool stuff that you can do without putting a name on it or something. I don't know, like that's what I kind of remind myself like. But I do love going out on the bike and stuff and going for runs and things like that. But yeah, definitely. I think whenever I was in London, I was 100% doing like endurance events as a means of escapism. Like, you know, it's really bad. Like I had this really bad habit for a while, but the last probably year and a half I lived in London, I lived on my own. And I would sometimes get home and if I'd like been out for a few drinks with friends or something, I'd get home and I'd like open the computer and I'd find myself just entering races. I'd just literally be like, oh, I'm free that weekend. I'll just like enter another race. There's another £200 for that entry or another X hundred for this entry. And like, yeah. And I guess maybe partly is I don't have the same kind of disposable income that I had then, but I'm not quite so prone to that little just add to that race. But I mean, I don't know. I'm still not like, you know, if you looked at my calendar for the next couple of weeks, you'd be like, are you sure you're over that habit? Because I've got a couple of marathons and a mountain biking race and I've got a ski mountaineering race. So yeah, like there's a few things going on.
Your outlook and your style, how you kind of approach the way that you do these events really came through in that Project 282. First of all, what a badass stamp to have on your adventure CV. 282 Munros in Scotland in 120 consecutive days. But what I love was how you focused on staying in bothies, you were raising money for charity. You did it solo as well. There was just a clear intention as to the style in which you wanted to do it in. How did those 4 months shape you as a person?
Like honestly, I think it's probably like the best 4 months of my life. It was like, it's funny because it was so long. Like I wasn't going out there trying to like break myself every day. Like the last few weeks of it were felt more like that, you know, kind of I guess a bit more what like racing kind of might feel like. But it was mostly like, to be honest, it's funny because actually, you know, this summer will be is that right? No, it's 8 years. It's 2018 that I did it, so it'll be 8 years. But honestly, it just still feels like my little like love letter to Scotland. And like I go back to Scotland every year, and I always like feel like part of my soul is just like hanging out in the Highlands. And I really annoy my boyfriend, like whenever we're in Scotland together, because sometimes, you know, like if we go to more remote places and I'll be like, oh, I like left my bike here whenever I went to climb that hill. Or like, you know, I always seem to have like a story about like pretty much every little road in Scotland. And he's just like, oh, get over it already. Like, I know you climbed the Munros, well done. But yeah, I did it. I mean, it was pretty cool. It was quite a good, like, I mean, I was super lucky with the weather as well. Like I had probably 5 weeks in that summer that was like really solid, high pressure, sunshine, blue skies, not the kind of weather you necessarily associate with Scotland. Um, I mean, I did also have a few like named storms, and like I think the September was like I think it had like the wettest September or something on record or something, like it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows, but no, it was really good. um and I don't know, I think it was just one of those things that actually like it really taught me, like especially when I was near the start of it, I had no idea if I'd be able to get through it, if my body would hold up, like how it would go. um and I mean, there's definitely a lot of kind of self-reliance and stuff, and just being like, well, especially in some of the places, it's like you are actually pretty remote, and if you need help, it's not going to be quick. So it's best way to get out of trouble is not to get into trouble in the first place. And so kind of, I guess, yeah, in terms of like decision making and things like that, it definitely gave me like a whole new level of that compared to what I'd had before, and like gave me a lot of kind of, as the time went on, like develop my confidence in my ability to make decisions, and yeah, kind of understand how I was feeling, how I was moving in the terrain, like when was the time to call it, when was the time to push on through. And yeah, it was pretty good. uh,
Confidence was one of the main topics that when I spoke to my friends, that I was telling them about having this chat with you and what you got up to. Most of my female friends were asking about confidence and safety because they wanted to know what it was like to solo wild camp and adventure. And it really felt like that was actually the biggest thing holding them back from going and doing something like that. From your experiences adventuring and doing a lot of solo trips yourself, what advice can you give to those females who are thinking about heading out and doing it themselves?
yeah, it's funny, it's something that like people kind of say that to me, especially about wild camping. I think it comes up, and I don't know, I genuinely feel much safer whenever I'm out on my own in the hills than when I'm out on my own in a city. Like, it's kind of, I'm not really, I don't know. I mean, maybe sometimes, I don't know, like I'm not particularly scared by like the landscape and stuff. And generally, I find the people that you meet out in the hills are pretty friendly and stuff, because they all want to be there as well. There's been I mean, there are a few occasions that you meet someone that you're like, probably wouldn't want to be on my own in a bothy with this person, maybe, like, and it's probably not sinister at all, but just sometimes you kind of get a vibe. But most of the time I'm kind of like, if I'm camping, I tend to try and like camp kind of, yeah, like, if I'm carrying my tent around, then I want to camp somewhere that's pretty cool, that whenever I wake up it might be quite a nice sunrise or whatever. So I will sometimes camp in more difficult places. But I don't know, like I think it's one of those things, like, I mean, I've led trips in Scotland, like wild camping trips, and that's definitely been, especially amongst the females, that's been one of the things that they're like, oh, I just don't know if I'd have the confidence to just go out and do it. And I don't know if it's just kind of for being on your own, if that's the thing, or like, I don't know. I mean, I always feel like, whenever I say, like, if I'm, when I'm working as a mountain leader and I'm kind of, yeah, if I'm running like wild camping trips and stuff, like I'll always, if you come and do it in a group environment, then you get comfortable with the mechanics of it, I guess. And then, you can build up the confidence to then be like, actually, I can put my tent up. I can decide where's going to be a good place to pitch. Like I know how to go and get water and X, Y, Z, or like, even like things like going to the loo. Like, I think sometimes people get like quite uncomfortable about that kind of, like, what do you do if you need to do a poo whenever you're out in the mountains? And like, kind of even just kind of going through that kind of thing, and just kind of stopping it being as kind of daunting.
You said that the dream of yours was to live a life that I don't feel I need to get away from. If you were able to like share what you learned through your experiences, how do you practically change your life?
Wow. I, d- I don't know. I guess it goes back a little bit to, kind of what we were saying before of that whole like when you are viewing stuff with hindsight, that you're not being too harsh on yourself, because obviously with hindsight, everything's 2020 in hindsight, isn't it? But it's that kind of when you are looking back with hindsight that, you still remember that you didn't have full information of everything. And then, yeah, I don't know. I always find like there's so many lessons that you learn in the outdoors, especially whenever you're like doing things that are challenging you and stretching your comfort zone and stuff, that can then be applied to day-to-day life, however that looks for you. Like, even if it's like, there's lessons that you can take that can be taken into a corporate environment and stuff. And it doesn't have to be like environment specific. And, I think like big things for me are things like resilience and just like that kind of like, I guess like determination in a sense as well, but also like being accepting when things don't quite go the way that you want them. Yeah. And I think just kind of breaking things down sometimes, like, especially with the Munros, like that was one that at the start, like I was like 282 of them, like how long is this going to take? But actually it was like, right, today I'm going to go and climb this one, and then I'll cycle and I'll climb that one, and just like break it down, and it'll be like, and even break it down more than that and be like, I'm going to cycle to this point here, I'm going to leave my bike there, and then I'm going to go up by this route. And and like just breaking things down, suddenly you can get through big things by doing lots of small steps towards it. So
I think when you ask people about why it is that they don't actually live the life that they want to live, I would say that most people would end up replying money. And you clearly know about money more than most, given your training as an accountant. Um, what's your philosophy around money?
um it's a funny one, because sometimes I'm a bit like, it'll be fine, future Emily's problem, put it on the credit card. And then other times I'm more sensible about it, and I'm like, no, I need to actually like knuckle down, do some work, save up. And yeah, I mean, I guess, I'm fortunate in the sense of like, doing seasonal jobs like does kind of give you time windows that you maybe don't get otherwise. I'm really lucky in the sense that my family's always like pretty supportive, and even if it doesn't explicitly get said, I think I've always felt that even if stuff goes wrong, like if I need to, I could go home at any point. And like, so there's always kind of that like safety net, even if it's not necessarily acknowledged that often. I think certainly when I was doing the Munros and stuff, that definitely was like, I was aware of it, and like having like my mum and dad just being like, yeah, like you can come home and I wouldn't starve. Like, so that I kind of, I guess, makes it easier in that sense.
For those that look at your life and they see you skiing and out in the mountains and traveling across Europe in the Alps, whilst they're maybe in a life situation that they dislike, and they say, oh, you're so lucky the way that you are able to live your life. What would you say to that?
It's a little bit of you make your own luck. Like I have worked really hard to be in the position that I am, and certainly whenever I left accountancy to start ski instructing, I went from having a stable career with good, like, I knew what paycheck I was getting each month, and I mean, there's my finances do not look anything like they would look if I'd stayed in accountancy. Let's just say that. And certainly, like it's probably the first, I reckon the first 5 or 6 winter seasons I did, it was kind of, if I can break even, then I'm doing okay. Like certainly whenever I first moved here, my first winter here, that was my goal, was to break even. Which, I think I was probably, I was already in my early 30s at that point. And I think that's kind of a bit of a weird financial goal to have whenever you're in your early 30s, is that your aim for 5 months of working is that you break even. But it then kind of, like, I mean, I've been based here for a while now, so I'm lucky in that, like, I get, I have return clients. I've been with the same ski school for a while, so I'm quite high up the priority list and things like that. So, like, there's plenty of work now. But sometimes I do get like this. Sometimes, it's kind of, I'll try and work quite a lot in the winter, so it kind of takes the pressure off in the summer. And so I try and still have like time to do things for myself. But there's definitely times in the winter that I'm like, when did I last ski for fun? Or, go and like do some kind of like mountaineering, or like, like take advantage of actually like being here rather than just skiing the same slopes. And I know that's like, very much like a nice problem to have, but it is, I think sometimes it's easy to kind of like look at the lifestyle and be like, oh, it's living the dream, but like it is still working. And in the winter, like, we'll work 7 days a week, and sometimes you're absolutely knackered and you just got to get up and do it again. Wearing ski boots for the whole way through the season's not great for your feet.
For those who have a dream and know what it is that they want to do with their life, but are just working out the how to get there, what would you say to those people for taking that first step?
I think sometimes the first step's the hardest, isn't it? I think, like, I am quite a believer of like saying yes to things before you're quite ready, or like booking something before you think you can do it, or like making something fall into, like, I mean, I'm kind of trying to think of like an example, like during COVID we came back and we're in Edinburgh for a bit, and we had to quarantine for 2 weeks when we came back. And I think I'd been in isolation or whatever it was for like 3 days before I booked a one-way ticket with my bike to Penzance, and was just like, I've been talking about cycling Land's End to Johnny Groats for a while, like, I'm gonna make it happen. And literally, like, I think when my 2 weeks quarantining was up, then my bike and I trundled off to Waverley Station and went down to Penzance. And then, yeah, like, I did a Land's End Johnny Groats, and it was because I'd made that commitment to book the train. Then I did the rest of the logistics and the admin and worked out, like, how far am I going to cycle each day? Where am I going to stay? Like, take that first step, make that commitment, and then the rest kind of falls into place. And, I definitely find that sometimes like races are quite good for that, because, if you sign up for a race and it makes you feel like, right, well, I better go and do some running, because otherwise I'm not going to get through this marathon or whatever. And yeah, like, I mean, I find with, like, I'm still plugging my way through the ski instructor pathway, and like there's definitely times that I'm just like, right, well, I'm probably not quite ready for that exam, but I'm going to book it, and then I'll find out if I'm ready for it or not. And yeah, so I think sometimes parting with a bit of money can make it help it. Like, it doesn't have to be exorbitant amounts of money, but sometimes just like making that little commitment, and yeah,
100%.
it definitely can help.
Same with me. My first business, I was always desperate to start a business. And when I first started my previous business, a trekking company, first thing I did was I built a website, and it cost me £40.
Yeah,
And it became real. It was
yeah,
on the screen. I could
yeah,
see it. And that massively helped. But your situation of, I mean, the biggest leap, I think that's something that people don't talk about often, is taking that massive leap in your life when there is no safety net to catch you and you don't know what's coming or where it's going to lead you. But it almost is irrelevant. The main thing that matters is taking that leap.
yeah.
And when you're, mid to late 20s, deciding to leave being an accountant and going out and pursue being a ski instructor and living a life in the outdoors, that sounds petrifying. So for people who are like, oh my God, like, how do I do it? What was that like in that moment? How did you really think, okay, I'm going to do this thing. This is happening. How did you bring yourself to that point?
It's funny because actually there were like, I would be lying if I said that it was a quick and easy decision to make. Like, there was quite a lot of agonizing over it. I remember a lot of phone calls with my dad that I was like on the phone to him, but like in tears, like, just kind of taking the time to like recognize that I wasn't happy with the path that I was on, I think. And I guess just having in the back of your head that if stuff doesn't work out, like not being too proud that if you need to take a step back, it doesn't mean that you failed. It just means that you're taking a different route or something, I guess. That sounds a bit deep.
That's great. What's amazing is how people are able to perform to an extremely high level in lives and jobs that they dislike. How does that translate for you when you're in a job and life that you like and you've still got that mentality?
I, ju- I mean, I don't know. I guess it's like anything, there's definitely times that I question all my life decisions. And, I think sometimes I can be a bit, I get a bit too on the old what if train and like, go down the like scrolling on Instagram and seeing like, oh, this person's done this thing. Oh, maybe I should be doing more of that. And like, and I can be really grumpy if I've like spent the day inside for whatever reason and I haven't achieved what I wanted to get done that day, or like, or if it's sunny and I haven't gone out and like enjoyed being in the mountains and things like that, like I definitely still like suffer from that kind of feelings. And yeah, I mean, it's funny though. I think I then find like whenever I'm teaching and stuff, I definitely have moments that, whenever people, like some people can be challenging. And you can like, and then it makes you kind of question what you're doing and like, oh, am I even like doing a good job here, or like whatever else. But then you get other times that, like recently I was skiing with a family, and we're skiing along and me and the dad were like within talking distance from each other, but as we're skiing, and I was just like looking around. It was a stunning day, and I was just like, "Whoa, this is pretty cool, isn't it?" And he's like comes down, and he's just like, and honestly, then I just started like beaming because I was just like, "This is actually really cool," because he's really like enjoying just being here, and I think that kind of like emphasized to me kind of why I do the work that I do. Is like it's not necessarily about the skiing or about the hiking, but I think it is just kind of about the landscape and like the appreciation of like being out in nature like that. And if I can help people develop the skills that allow them to do that more, then that's great. And like, with both skiing and like with hiking, and especially if I'm doing kind of stuff where we're doing like wild camping and things as well, like sometimes I like to think that I'm trying to help people develop their skills that they don't need me anymore, which seems like a silly way to try and work, to try and like effectively make yourself redundant. But if you can do that, then well, hopefully sometimes they like you and they might want to still do stuff with you anyway. Or they might tell their mates that, what, I had a really great time with this person and like you should go and do this with her, whatever. But I think like sometimes there's quite a lot in that it can be quite like empowering to like help people kind of feel these things that maybe they felt that they couldn't have experienced otherwise. Or yeah, like I mean, one trip that's coming to mind, I led a trip up in Finland, in the Arctic last February, and we were doing this hut to hut trip, and on the fifth day of it, we had like a really long day, and like I knew it was going to be a long day, and I kind of told the girls like, it's going to be like we're setting off before the sun rises, we're going to get to the next hut in the dark, like it's February north of the Arctic Circle, like the days are short anyway. But it ended up being the last probably 10, maybe 8 to 10 kilometers of that day. Like the wind picked up a lot, we had to go quite relatively high, like over the fjalls, and it was like the wind was strong, and thankfully it was coming from the south, so it wasn't that cold, like relatively speaking. But whenever we got to the hut that evening, I remember like one of the girls saying to me, she was just like, she's like, it was so cool because before this week, I never would have imagined that we would have done a day like that. And then she's like, and I felt really reassured because, like, you know, you were out in front and you're like there, like checking your compass and like making sure we're going in the right direction. And like, she's like, I never felt unsafe, but also I could never have imagined myself doing that before. And like, that was one of those moments that you're like, oh, got like, you know, warm and fuzzy feelings. And yeah, I mean, that's pretty cool. And also probably one of those things that I was like, if you'd told the me of 5, 10 years ago that I would be in a position that I would be doing that, I'd be like, really? Like, yeah. Um,
Emily, it's been so nice chatting with you and hearing all your stories. I think one of the main things for me is just how refreshing it is. Because you were describing just then about how you can be on social media and look at someone else's life and then you compare it to your own. You're like, oh, I wish I was doing that. And I was doing that to you. As I was doing research for this, I was like, oh my God, she's out in the mountains, she's in the Alps. I was like, this looks amazing. And it just made me realize that actually we're all going through life. No one's kind of got it licked as much as social media likes to tell you that. But for you, a decade ago, you had a dream to build a life that was far more adventurous, to be outdoors, and you've done that. So now you're in this spot. What would be the dream for the next decade?
I mean, you say I've done that, but honestly, I didn't spend a single night in my tent in 2025, like, which I think is a horrible statistic. I did bivvy, like, I wasn't like, you know, completely not sleeping out in the wilds. I bivvied and I bothied, but I didn't spend a night in my tent. And, you know, I'm a bit like, that's a bit sad. Um, I don't know. I think I'm always trying to search for like adding more adventure in. I think, yeah, sometimes it's just kind of carving out the time and even like, you know, doing like these kind of jobs and stuff. Like sometimes, you know, I find like, especially with the hiking work, like sometimes in the summer, like, you know, I'll be away I'll go to Chamonix and I'll do like a Tour de Mont Blanc for a week or 10 days or whatever. And, you know, there's kind of quite a lot of like away doing stuff, but it's not necessarily doing stuff for me per se. I mean, it is because I'm, you know, helping my bank account. But you know, sometimes I do still kind of feel like, I don't know, like I need to do more fun things. I grew up in Northern Ireland, for example, and when I look at my Strava heat map, my Ireland Strava is remarkably bare compared to like Scotland, for example. And I mean, the heat map obviously only shows, well, I don't know how long that's been a feature on Strava, but you know, there's been a long time of doing stuff that I haven't had um, on there. But it does kind of make me think like, you know, like I go home and I just kind of see my family and my friends, and I don't necessarily do anything that's like big and adventurous. And, you know, sometimes I'm like, oh, maybe I should plan a cycling trip around Ireland or something, you know? Um, I don't know. I'm really bad for looking at maps and just getting ideas of wanting to go places. And like, yeah, I want to go everywhere.
It's so amazing to hear just how kind of humble and that hunger for adventure that you have as well. Because I always feel the same. I'm sure so many people listening to this podcast feel the same. Like we always want more time outdoors. We always want more time adventuring, particularly if those are your hobbies anyways. And it's made me realize that actually that's never going to leave me. I'm always going to want more.
Yeah, I
And
think so.
maybe it's just being okay with that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's actually a really good point, isn't it? Because like if you're always like such like, you know, when you do something and then sometimes people will say to you, like as soon as you finish one thing, the first question is like, what's next? And actually I think sometimes having like reflection time and just being like, well, I just did this thing and I'm just gonna think about that rather than because I mean I'm really bad for whenever I'm doing something, I will be thinking about like, oh, it'd be really cool if I could like go here or do this. Or, rather than sometimes just being like, actually, just take a chill and like sit on your bike and look around what you're doing right now, rather than thinking like, oh, I could do this, I could do that, you know. Um,
Emily, thanks so much for coming on. Absolutely loved it.
Thanks, Jake.
Cheers.